welcome back to another episode of Us Anxious Folk. I am in a crazy situation right now because I'm talking to someone all the way from Jersey. So pretty much the other side of the world. I'm here with Raymond, who has kindly volunteered to come and share his story. So welcome, Raymond. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So tell us, if you will, your anxiety story.
Sure. So I had my first panic attack when I was 17 years old. The night before, I drank like a lot, way more than I should have. And the next day, we were leaving the party. And the party, for anyone that doesn't know, which is probably most people because we're from different sides of the world, where I live in New Jersey is I'm right between like New York City, Philadelphia, and then up here's the Pocono Mountains. So we had gone to a party up in the mountains, and the next day we were driving home. It was like maybe 10 or 11 in the morning, and I was driving, I just was looking up at the mountains, and I started to feel really like just small, and I started to get derealization, but I didn't know what derealization was yet. My palms started sweating, my heart started racing, and I thought I was having a heart attack because I didn't know what a panic attack was. I was 17. And so I was like, oh my God, something's wrong, something's wrong. And I pulled over. I was like, you got to take me to the hospital. And my cousin was with us. She got in the front and started driving. And I got in the back seat with my brother, and my best friend was there too. And I was literally crying, hugging them, saying, I'm going to die. Like, I love you guys. Like, I really thought I was going to die.
Yeah.
And we were so far out in the middle of nowhere that it took us about 30 minutes to get to a hospital. And by the time I got to the hospital, or not, yeah, I was at the hospital and spoke to a doctor. The doctor, they see so much. He was just so calm, like, hey, you're having a panic attack, everything's fine. And I'm like, no, everything's
Yeah.
not fine. Like,
Yeah.
I was like a young tough guy, and I was like trying to, no, you need to help me, and blah blah blah, and I was in the hospital for about 6 hours that day. My parents had to drive all the way up from, where they were to where we were. And when I went home, um, ironically, I've always been terrified of medication, which is pretty common with our condition.
Mm.
And, but, my dad's like, 6'3", 280 pounds. And he's like, you're going to take what the doctor gave you. And that's that. And I was like,
Yeah.
okay. So I took this pill, and I like fell out. I must have slept for 2 days. And then when I woke up, for about 2 weeks, I was agoraphobic. Just for 2 weeks. I
Mhm.
couldn't shower alone. I didn't want to be alone.
Mhm.
And then it went away, and I was normal for a couple years. And then when I was about 21, it came back again for about 3 months this
Mhm.
time. And then I got better. And then it came back when I was about 25. And I've had some form of agoraphobia since I was 25. Now, um, the first few times I had agoraphobia, it was like just didn't not wanting to be alone, but then I'd kind of go back to a normal thing.
Mhm.
Same when I was 21. But when I hit 25, it got to a point where I couldn't even go outside to the mailbox. I mean, I was terrified of being alone. I would call anyone and everyone to come sit with me. I mean, I would make friends with people I couldn't even stand just to have people that would hang out with me
Yeah.
when I needed them. And I got really bad into drinking because it was the only way that I felt like I could get through my days, and it helped until it didn't.
Mhm.
And then it actually magnified my issues because the alcohol started giving me worse panic attacks and
Mm.
crazy hangovers. And, um, so I'll stop there because that's the background, and I'll let you, like, if you have any specific questions to bring us up to where we're at. Otherwise, I could talk about this for an hour if you want.
Well, there's just so much of that I like going to the hospital and when you said the doctor was so calm, like I remember that and it just being so jarring, like the rest of the world is so calm and you are on fire, you know?
Yeah.
And it's the scariest place to be when no
Yeah.
one seems to panic as much about what you're feeling.
Yeah. But then
Uh,
if they do, you freak out more.
well, yeah, I suppose it's a double-edged sword, isn't it?
Yeah.
But so when you first, you know, like experienced agoraphobia in the very beginning, that 2 weeks, did you say?
Yeah.
What was the reaction of your family and friends? Yeah, like
Right.
talk me through that.
Sure. So a lot of, you know, so they don't understand it, obviously, and I don't either. So at first they were like, oh, like, what do you mean you can't shower alone? I'd be like, well, you got to stand outside the door while I shower. Why? Because I'm scared that's going to happen again. Oh, you're fine. The doctors did all the tests. So very dismissive.
Yeah.
And thankfully for that part, it was so short lived that it didn't become too routine. And then like I got over it. And,
Mm,
I played my whole senior football season traveling to all the games. But I remember looking back, we had two scrimmages before our season started, which was about a week after that. And I never forget the one scrimmage. I had this like run and a touchdown, and then I came off to the sideline, and my face was like tingling.
mm,
And that was one of my really early symptoms, was like a tingly face. And I thankfully I don't get that anymore, but I remember just being like, why is my face tingling? Like I've never had this.
mhm.
And then I remember the second scrimmage, we went ironically back up into the Pocono Mountains, past where I had had my first attack.
Yeah,
And
God.
I remember being on the bus and just feeling weird and not knowing how to explain it. Just weird, just out of it, just not normal.
Mhm.
And then I got there and I played and I forgot about it, which is ironically kind of the secret to getting better.
Mm.
And you naturally do it when you're younger, and now you think too much. I think too much. So that
Yeah.
was what the first 2 weeks was like for me.
Yeah. I love that you mentioned when you're younger, you do just kind of get on with things. You don't have that kind of mental script following you around of like, what does this mean and what does that mean and what do I need to do about it? And so when they put you on medication, and the doctor identified that it was a panic attack, was there any kind of nudge towards like therapy, or was there any explanation as to what had happened to you? Or was it just that was that, it's done?
So the first panic attack, I was given one pill, not
All right.
not put on steady medication.
Right. Okay.
So I believe it was a benzo. I don't remember,
Mhm.
but yes, for those first 2 weeks, no, there was nothing. There was no, I never even went back to the doctor. I
Yeah.
just got on with my life. But when I reached 21 and I started having a lot of panic attacks and it started affecting other people's lives, then they were like, okay, my mom would be like, I can't leave work every day. So you
Mm,
got to do something about this.
mm,
So yeah, there was a push to therapy, but unfortunately, I was at an age where I was no longer on my parents' insurance. And, I don't come from a lot of money. My parents do okay. And, but like to put out $300 a week for therapy was not going to happen. So I had to suffer. And that's why alcohol worked for me.
mm. I don't share this a lot, but I turned to alcohol too in the very beginning. And I would just get drunk every day because it was just like such a nice feeling compared to everything else. So it definitely helped in the beginning, but then like you said, it helped until it didn't. And it made me a lot more frightened of my body and a lot of, physical sensations that came along. In the beginning, feeling numb was a good thing and feeling
Yeah.
drunk was a good thing. And then suddenly feeling drunk was terrifying. Um, And so for you, did you said you didn't want to be alone and you wanted to have people around you. Was there a sense that you couldn't trust what was happening in your body at all times? Or was it just in certain situations?
Well, it was pretty much at all times during that period.
Yeah.
Obviously, like the more you have it, even when you get really bad, it does seem like there is a part of you that the more you have it, you start to realize, like, okay, I can be alone for an hour.
Mm.
You know, so even when I was really bad, there were times where I was like, okay, as long as I'm home in my comfort zone and there's people in the neighborhood, I'm okay, you
There's
know?
humans around.
Yeah, yeah. So as long as I have neighbors and one of them's home, and when I tell you, I ran out and knocked on their doors in the middle of the night before.
Wow.
So what really I believe made me worse at 25 was, and this is for anyone watching who thinks that alcohol is the answer, I developed a heart arrhythmia from drinking too much.
Mm-hmm.
And I developed what's called SVT, supraventricular tachycardia.
Mm-hmm.
My heart rate goes up to 300 beats per minute during an attack.
Wow.
And the first time I had it, I was drinking a lot, like every day, and I didn't know what it was. And my parents just happened to be in Jamaica. So
Of
the
course.
people that I needed the most during that moment were not there. And I'll never forget, and this is such a horrible thing, and I think back now, and I haven't been drunk in 10 years probably,
Mm.
but I remember having this attack, but I didn't know what SVT was at the time. My heart was beating so fast you could see my shirt moving like this.
Wow.
And I remember opening the fridge and getting a handle, the big bottles of Captain Morgan, and I chugged from the top almost to the bottom.
Wow.
And at the time, I didn't even realize that was a problem because I was so focused on not having anxiety
Yeah.
that I didn't care what I had to do to not have anxiety.
Mm.
And so I developed this heart condition, and for years I kept telling the doctors I have SVT. I've looked it up, and this is what I have. And they put me on heart monitors, and they're like, "No, it's just anxiety. You don't have SVT." And then finally, when I was like, well, I won't give ages yet. We'll get to the age because there's a reason I'll get into that. About 4 or 5 years ago, give or take, uh, it finally got caught on a monitor, and then I was diagnosed with SVT after 10 years of having it.
Mm.
Um, and once I was diagnosed, they wanted to put me on meds, but I'm terrified of medication. So I said to the doctor when I left that day, I'm gonna try things my way, and then we'll talk medication. And if it doesn't work, I left. I went on a diet. I slowed down my drinking majorly to where like I would only have like 1 or 2 drinks a week. And I went on a strict diet, started working out again, and I went 4 years without an SVT attack.
Wow.
And then I started slowly working on getting out more. I started dating someone who was really, 98% okay with my condition. And
Yep.
when they're okay with your condition, it takes some pressure off of you,
Mm-hmm.
because it's like when you start dating someone and you tell them you have this and you say, I don't know, I could be like this forever, or maybe I'll get better. I don't know. You feel like there's a clock where they're going to no longer put up with it and leave. So you feel this immense pressure to try to get better.
Mm-hmm.
And when you don't, you feel like you're going to let them down and you kind of give up and blah, blah, blah. So, yeah. So I kind of went off on a tangent there, but yeah.
No, so talk us through what happened next. You're 25, you're, suffering. How, like,
So,
besides the diet, how did you work your way through?
well, the diet thing, that was actually when I was 35. So
Okay.
when I was 25, I got SVT. I had it, but I wasn't diagnosed.
Right. Yep.
When I was 25, my son was born.
Wow.
And I drank a whole bottle of Bacardi to get to the hospital an hour away.
Yep.
And he was, I was, to the naked eye, I was perfectly sober. No one could tell. I remember every detail. It's not like I was like blackout drunk. I remember every aspect of my son being born, but I had to drink enough to, kill somebody basically to get there.
Yeah.
And then I did it again the next day to go see him in the hospital. And the single most heartbreaking aspect of my condition for me is that so my son is a freshman in high school now. He's going to be 15 in April. Um, he lives about an hour and 15 minutes away. And uh, when he was a baby, I was still with his mother. I went down 2 or 3 times to visit. I had to get drunk to do it, and I'd spend the night, whatever. And then I went down to his pre-K graduation. I made it for that, and I've never been down there since, still to this day. I'm very close to my son. We talk every day. He comes to my house a lot. He spends weeks and weekends. I mean, I'm a great father as best as I can be in my scenario, but I'm so much better than I used to be. As you can tell, I'm at work right now, which we'll get to that, but I'm not quite well enough to, no, I don't want to say quite well enough. I'm nowhere near well enough to get down where he lives. And I actually, he graduated 8th grade this past June, and I was doing really well at the time. And I was like, I'm going to his graduation. That's it. And I got in the car and I drove about 30 miles, and I stopped at this diner that I hadn't been to in, 16 or 17 years. And I ate breakfast. And the thing about our condition is his graduation wasn't until 5, and I left at like 9 a.m. because I was like, I got to get down there. And so I went down, I had breakfast at this diner. I was in a really good mood. And when I came out from breakfast and got in the car and it was time to go, I just froze and I couldn't do it. And I cried for like 3 days straight. And I had to call my son and tell him I wasn't coming after telling him that I was. He was really cool about it. He really was very understanding, and I guess because he's used to it, And once he reached a certain age, I had a conversation with him about my condition, but I didn't get too detailed because I wholeheartedly believe that this is almost like a seed that can be planted. And so I never told my son to, I told him I had a heart condition and that the heart condition scares me. And that if I get to, sometimes traveling can make me get scared of it. I didn't even get into what agoraphobia is and all with him, because I believe that you can really talk yourself into having it. And I don't even want to put that into his head. So whether that's true or not, I don't know, but that's what I've chosen to believe.
It's a scary line with like being really open with your kids and, kind of like I really want to have an open discussion about, mental health with my daughters, knowing that they might be prone to kind of the same things as me. But then it's also, like you said, you don't want to plant that seed, and it's really hard knowing how to approach that. So I can totally understand where you're coming from with that. And I think it sounds like you've done an amazing job. Being a parent with agoraphobia is hard, really challenging. And it sounds like you've done amazing. So
Thank you.
well
Trying.
done. Yeah.
It's also tough to be so I'm engaged.
Wow,
And
congratulations.
it's tough to be a fiance with, and so my fiance actually lives about 45 minutes away also. And God bless her. For the years we've been together, she has driven out here every time. And she's moving out here, and she is pushing me to get better. Sometimes she gets mad, rightfully so, and wants to be like, F this and give up. But she hasn't. And she's going into this. And I said to her when we got engaged, after the happiness of the engagement was over, I said, okay, you have to go into this knowing that I may never get better. I've
Mm.
had this a long time, and
Mhm.
I might never be normal.
Mm.
And she's like, as long as you're trying and I see you trying, then I'm okay with it. So since then, I have gotten a better job
Mhm.
that I have to drive to a little bit of ways. And at that job, I am alone by myself right now in the middle of nowhere. Um, and I have had many tough days here. You can see I'm in the mountains. See, there's like nothing behind me.
Yeah.
So, um, and when I first started, I mean, it was like tough. I had anxiety, and I kept wanting to like jump in my car and leave. And I still have some bad nights, but I've been here about 4 months now,
Mhm.
and things seem to be getting better. I am also finally in active therapy. My insurance covers weekly therapy sessions. I have um I gained the nerve to try Xanax. It didn't really do anything for me, so I don't take it, but like just trying is a win because I was so terrified to ever take anything.
Yeah.
Um and we go out to eat, farther and farther all the time outside of my comfort zones. And we go shopping at malls and, things that I haven't done in so many years. And, I definitely still have a comfort zone, but it's a lot bigger than it was, a year ago and 2 years ago and 3 years ago. So,
Mhm. Yeah. I um I think I really just want to point out what you said about your fiance getting upset sometimes. You said rightfully so. I
yes,
think something really um important is those relationships that we have and the people that we hold close to us. They are going to be upset sometimes. And I think part of a healthy relationship is remembering that your behaviors through your anxiety is going to affect the people that you love in some way. And it's like, it's okay to give them space to have that reaction. Um,
sure.
we so often want to say, like, but I can't help it, or,
Right.
and you can't, but you can also give them the space to be upset or be annoyed sometimes. Um, and so you said that she's, gently pushing you.
Yeah. Yeah.
How do you
Um,
kind of work your way through that? Like, how do you, try, but also be gentle with yourself? And how does that look for you?
I have learned that um, jumping off the deep end for me is not the way to go.
Hmm.
I'm not going to just be like, you know what? Forget it. I'm getting on a plane and going to Florida today. And
Yeah.
and for some people, there is that moment.
Mm.
Everyone's recovery from this is so different. And some people are like, I just woke up and I just went for it.
Mm.
That doesn't work with me because if I crash, if I turn around, then my my uh my backslide is way worse than a
Hmm.
small defeat.
Hmm.
So, for instance, when I tried to go to my son's graduation, I was 30 miles away. And then when I started to have a panic attack, I was like, "Oh my god, I got to get home!" And I crashed. I just for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks it took me to get back to where I was because I let that affect me so much. So I can only imagine if I was on a plane, or
Yeah.
drove 3 states away. As it stands, I was only as far as people go just to have dinner anyway.
Mm.
Someone will drive 20 minutes to go have dinner all the time.
Mm.
So, um, my way of getting better is baby steps and to just small victories. And, something that I've really, really like helped me a lot was I wrote down a bunch of short-term goals
Mhm.
and then I wrote down a bunch of long-term goals because a lot of times if you don't write things down you don't realize the progress you've actually made.
Yes.
And so I did all these like things, and for instance my and this is probably very common, and I actually am going to speak to my state senator. I don't know what it's like how laws are made where you're at, but we each have our own states, and if you speak to your state senator and you come up with something that he likes, he might try to make it a state law. And my license had expired, and to get to the DMV, we call it here, to renew my license was outside of my comfort zone. But otherwise, I was perfectly healthy and capable of driving around my town. But I lost that privilege only because I couldn't make it, to where I could renew my license. And it was such a big blow to my ego and my self-worth to not be able to drive because of this condition. And I think that anyone with a serious medical condition, mental health included, if it keeps them from going to renew their license, then there should be another way for them to do it. Because
Yeah,
I shouldn't have,
accessibility.
right. I shouldn't have, if I'm healthy enough to drive, but my condition keeps me from driving far, I should be able to renew my license without losing my privilege. And
Yeah.
so that was a big thing for me. So to go where I was going with this is I went and I had to take the driver's test all over again
Oh
and get a
God.
new license.
Oh wow. God, the things that we
So
do.
I was 38 years old taking my driver's test again.
Wow.
And since then, I got my driver's license. I took my motorcycle test. I have a motorcycle license now.
Yeah.
I know this is not a big thing where you are, and if it's not something you're into, like, okay, no, whatever. But I went and got my gun permit. Like, it was all on my like list of things that I wanted to do.
Yep.
And when I sat down, I was like, I've actually done all this. Then I felt accomplishment. I felt some self-worth, and then it builds that confidence, and then you can push yourself to do more things.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's so important. I recorded an episode recently where I spoke about writing down, like reflections on the past year and what did you learn and in which ways did you grow? Because we look at these things that we want and how we haven't got there yet, but we forget all the progress that we've made, all the huge
Right.
steps that we've made. You know, there's a quote that says, everything you now have, you once wanted. And I think
Yeah,
we are so quick to forget that.
for sure. For sure. Yeah, it's so easy to not realize the progress you've made if you don't look at it on a tangible piece of paper.
Yeah.
And then there were big goals too, and those take longer. So it was like small goal, small goal, small goal, big goal, small goal, small goal, big goal. And then I looked at it and I'm like, wow, I actually have accomplished a lot this year, even though I feel like I'm in the same space that I was. You're not,
Yeah.
and so that I really like. And I'll tell you, one thing I really love about where I work, I get to see beautiful sunsets every night.
I was watching that behind you before, just thinking,
Yeah,
wow,
yeah.
gorgeous.
So I try to appreciate these things when I'm here, instead of sitting here like, okay, if I have to go home, it's going to take me 3.5 minutes to get on the highway and then, 6 more minutes home. And so I just look at these things and I try to be happy to be alive,
Yes, that perspective shift is so, so necessary. Um, I think that's a really great way to look at things. Um, I'm curious about the SVT, did you call it?
Yeah.
Because
Yes.
I know that there are people who I've had on the show who, um, their heart rate is a really big concern,
Yeah.
and something that really triggers their panic. And so can you talk us through, how you cope with that? Yeah, tell
Sure.
us everything.
So, prior to having SVT, I used to have heart palps, skipped beats, double beats, and I think that's pretty common with our condition. And it almost sometimes makes you wonder what comes first, the chicken or the egg, or the horse or
Yeah.
the cow, So I never really thought about how to cope with them or get rid of them until I really had SVT. And for me, for my condition, one major thing that I can tell everyone, and this can work for anyone, even with just regular heart palps, whatever, magnesium is so wildly important to heart rhythm, and magnesium is not absorbed very well through your stomach. And so there's magnesium oils. Epsom salt baths are a great way to get your magnesium. And so I started doing Epsom salt baths, and you feel so calm. Your heart stops skipping beats. And there's also, ironically, because I just said the word calm, there's a supplement I use called Calm, and it's just like magnesium and regular stuff. It really does work even for anxiety. It makes you just feel calm. There's no drugs in it. It's just magnesium. And so I recommend that. And ever since I've taken that, my SVT is almost non-existent.
Wow.
Well, not just Calm, but like the magnesium bath, or I'm sorry, the Epsom salt baths, Calm. Eating mostly healthy. I try to stay away from greasy foods and things like that. I have definitely noticed if I overeat, I get heart palps. And I think because people like us are so in tune with our bodies, we pay attention to everything.
Yeah.
It probably happens to everyone, but they just don't notice it or care.
Yeah.
And yeah. So for me, I've learned, if I want a burger, a cheeseburger, I'll go out and I'll order a cheeseburger, but I'll cut it in half and I'll eat half the burger, and I'll have a couple fries, and I'll take the rest of the burger home and I'll eat it later after that digests. And I make sure I get enough water every day. And, I stay away from too much sugar. And doing these things has almost completely eliminated my heart palps, And so I recommend that for everyone, because nothing I just said is hard to do. And nothing I just said, it would benefit everyone. Everyone in the world would do better by not eating as much and not eating as much bad stuff. So
yeah. I think we often want to look for, what's something that I can do that's going to get rid of this? Like, what's a pill that I can take that'll get rid of it? But there's so much like work that we need to do during the day just to take care of our bodies. That, benefits us in so many other areas. But it's like we just want something quick. Like I want something that's just going to fix it.
Yeah, for sure. And, I've read so many success stories, and everyone's success story is different and everyone's timeline is different.
Yeah.
And the one thing that I will say, and you'll probably agree with this, we have a habit when we have this condition of thinking ours is different. They got better, but they're not as bad as me. They don't understand. Mine's different. And I am wildly guilty of it. I'm always like, well, cognitive behavioral therapy doesn't work with me because I already know that I'm not going to die from my panic attacks. I already know that if I just go do something, I'll probably be fine, and it still doesn't make me better. So what's the point?
Yeah.
And I talk myself out of so many things that are, that have gone through the scientific process and work.
Yeah. I've done that myself. I read books where, someone recovered from agoraphobia, and I'm like obviously they didn't have real agoraphobia,
Right.
But I mean, our perspective is the only one we can only see through our lens. And so I guess it's always going to be like that to a degree. But so what have you found besides taking baby steps and knowing that, maybe the giant leaps aren't for you? What have you found to be the most helpful in terms of like getting to where you are now?
So I've gotten the what's the word I'm looking for? The confidence and the trust in my body. Something I highly recommend to everyone: get a full physical. Every test you can get done, if you can afford it, if you have insurance. And I know there's many people out there who can't, and I really feel bad for them because I've been that before. But if you are like me and your panic attacks and your agoraphobia really revolve around your health,
Mm,
then what better way to get over it than to find out that you're actually healthy?
mm.
You know, so I had all the blood tests, all the EKGs, everything, and they're like, dude, you're a machine. You're like a 20-year-old, you know. So it gave me, you know, it didn't cure me, but it gave me more confidence.
Mm,
And what that got me to do was, and excuse the term, but this is what I call it, sit in my own shit. When I'm feeling like shit and I want to go home, I have learned to stay just one more minute.
yes.
And a lot, okay, here's an example. I went to dinner last night, and me and my fiance, and I had not eaten much all day, so I was a little, you know, you don't eat. I get anxiety when I don't eat. I get
Mm,
like very shaky, and so I knew we were going to eat, so I didn't want to overeat all day. So I was eating little things, and by the time we were going to dinner, I felt awful. And we went into so my downtown area, like I live like, you know, outside of New York City would be like a half-hour drive. For me to go to my downtown is like a small city.
mm,
So we went down into the city and we parked and we had to walk a couple blocks, and I didn't want to go at all, but I went. And then when we got there, she could tell she's like, "Do you want to just get takeout?" And I was like, "No." like, like, I'm fine. And I just sat there and like I had a glass of wine, you know, one glass, and then, you know, we had an appetizer, and then like I just calmed down, and then I was fine, and we had a good meal. And
mm,
then we went home and you know, laid in bed and watched a movie, and I sat in my shit. It didn't
mm,
feel good. I didn't enjoy it, but I didn't run home.
mm.
And what I gained from it was more confidence.
Yeah.
Now, the other thing that I allow myself to think, and this is really important, if I wanted to leave, I could have.
Mm,
I was not trapped. Nothing was keeping me from leaving.
yeah.
So why not sit for a minute? And if you really can't handle it anymore, then you can leave. But
Mm,
what's it going to hurt to try one more minute, and then one more minute, and then one more minute?
yeah. Yeah. So lots of compassion and lots of just like letting yourself feel the way that you feel without trying to change it or
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
It's really like I and one of my worst things that I did was like, oh, why do I feel like this? I'm checking my pulse, and like, you know, like you start like just doing weird things because you want to like feel normal, and it's like it's just a body sensation and it sucks, but it's not gonna kill you and it's gonna go away at some point. So just sit in your shit.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, one of the things I think was the most valuable for me to learn was that my body can do things and it literally doesn't mean anything. Like my body's doing stuff all the time, but like you said, you know, other people just don't notice it.
Yeah.
And so just stopping like that attention to it and stopping that like, oh my God, what is that? What do I do about it? Just letting it be there and just acknowledging that my body's actually doing like really cool stuff.
Yeah. Look how windy it is here. The sign's moving. Look at it.
Oh wow.
Yeah. Um, it's amazing how people like you and me seem to be more susceptible. My stepdad, he had a massive heart attack, like, I don't know, 10, oh, maybe 15 years ago at this point. Then
Hmm.
he had a brain tumor.
Wow.
And then he had a blood clot in his lung from the surgery from the brain tumor. He don't care about nothing. He's fine today.
Yeah.
He just goes and he flies to Florida. He gets on a cruise. He goes to the he doesn't care. And I'm like, if all that happened to me,
Yeah.
I'd have a room at the hospital that
Yeah.
I'd lock myself in
Yeah.
forever.
Yep.
And it's just
Yeah.
amazing how we're just all different. We all react differently, you know?
Yeah, for sure. I work in the hospital system and I see people every day that are so sick and I'm like I'm freaking out about, you know, like a minor stomach gurgle. Like
Yeah.
yeah, it's good to have that perspective though. Like it's good to zoom out and go there are other people dealing with their shit and like I'm not the big issue that I think I am, you know.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. We definitely also outside of our condition specifically, people with our condition need to self-reflect on how it does affect other people.
Mm.
And we need to have compassion for the people who deal with us too. As
Yes.
much as we want them to have compassion for our situation, we
Mm.
need to be like, wow, it's got to be tough to deal with me every day. Thank you. You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
And that's, something else that I've done, pretty recently that I probably didn't do in the past, because I just expected everyone like, well, if you love me,
Yeah.
and I don't even mean this like in a girlfriend or boyfriend sense, your mom, your brother, your sister, well, you love me, so this is just your job.
Yeah.
You're supposed to be there for me because I'd be there for you if it was you.
Mm.
And sometimes you just got to thank the people that do it for you,
Mhm.
and so I do that a lot now. I still thank my parents, I thank my brother, my girl, and I try to be appreciative. Even my son, I thank him for coming to see me. He's at an age now where uh he wants to hang out with girls and go out with his friends on weekends, and I take him from that every other weekend, and he comes and spends the time with me, and I hug him and I thank him and I tell him how much I appreciate it.
Yeah. That's so important. And I was thinking while you were saying that, when you said it must be hard being me, thanks for putting up with me kind of thing, like extend that to you as well. Like, and to me, like it's hard being me sometimes. Like, thank you to me for working through that,
Yeah,
I think you should
yeah.
really give yourself a pat on the back for learning to be with yourself and for encouraging yourself and supporting yourself through everything.
Thank you. And when you were just saying that, it reminded me of something that I think about. I am so much more blessed than so many people who have our condition. I have a big family. I have my parents. I have a brother that I hang out with all the time. I have a fiance. I have such a support system that so many people don't have.
Hmm.
And I really do feel bad for those people. And I know what it's like to, there's probably people who are going to watch this like, well, if he's at his job, he doesn't really have agoraphobia,
Mm.
And let me tell you, I look at people, I'm in, Facebook groups, and I see these people that are like, oh, I have to get on a plane tomorrow. And I'm like, well, then you're not agoraphobic. I can't get on a plane. But then to someone else, I'm that person, you
Yep.
know? Well,
Yep.
how are you at work? You're a security guard. If you're not, if you're agoraphobic, you wouldn't leave your house. And there's definitely levels to agoraphobia. There's different types of it.
For sure.
And I definitely, I feel very sorry. And I see a lot of people who are so lonely in these Facebook groups, and they just want a friend. They just want someone to love them. They just want someone to be there for them. And so many people don't have that. And it's heartbreaking. And I like, if I ever win the lottery, like I will dedicate my life to fighting this condition, because I just want a place where people can go or someone can come to them and know that they're not alone, and even the reprieve of like, imagine they didn't have to pay their bills for 3 months. They could just focus on getting better. You know what I mean? Because
Hmm.
it's a financial burden too. I mean, when I was at my worst, I relied on my parents. I had to live with them. I couldn't pay bills. I couldn't work.
Yeah, same.
Thankfully, I could. Thankfully, I had that.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. It does make a difference when you have that support network, and um I think that's really beautiful that you said you would dedicate your life to it, because it is, you know firsthand how isolating it can be, how much of a strain it can be. But I think there's also something to be said for um the work that you've done on your own anyway. You know what I mean?
Right.
Despite it all, like you've had your own back. And I think it's not to say that if you don't have a support network that making great strides isn't possible, because ultimately it's only you who can do that for yourself, even with your support network.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I had um, I don't want to say a name, because I don't know if you like don't want names said on your program, but there's
Oh
a
no, you can.
program. Okay, so have you ever heard of the Linden method?
Yes. Yep.
Okay, so I bought the method, years and years ago, and I read the book, and I'm like, well, this makes perfect sense, but if I could do that, I wouldn't have agoraphobia. If
Yes.
I could just do all the things in the book, then I wouldn't have it. Duh.
Yeah.
So I hunted this guy down on Twitter,
No way.
and I'm like, yeah, I'm like, this is a crock of shit. Oh, He's like, what's your phone number? He calls me.
Oh.
He was in Germany at the time, and he calls me, and it was real. It seemed like he really cared, and he's like, I wish I could work with all of you all day, every day, and help you. He's like, but I'm one person, and there's so many people hurting, and that's why I did the book. And
Mm.
unfortunately, I can't just help you or just help that person. But he said one thing to me that has stuck with me, and it's not so profound that he's like a genius for coming up with it, but it's a way to think that really is, uh, eye-opening. People with our condition, and the thing about agoraphobia is we all have so many different fears. Mine is dying. I just have this fear of dying, and it's with me at all times.
Mm.
Some people are like, oh, I'm just scared of spiders, or I'm just scared of flying, but once I'm off the plane, my agoraphobia is gone.
Mm.
I have a fear of dying, and that's what causes all my agoraphobia. But he said to me, you spend your whole life fearing death, and you let it dictate everything you're doing. You're staying home, you're doing this and that, you're missing out on everything, and you haven't died. And he's like, but one day you're going to be right.
Mm.
And it is going to be your day.
Mm.
And you're going to have missed the beauty of all the things you could have done. And what's worse than regret?
Mm.
And for like a whole day, I was like, yeah, like, okay. And then,
Yeah.
like we do, I fell back into my routine, and I was agoraphobic still for years afterwards. But,
Yeah.
I definitely appreciate that he took the time to call me. And that one thing he said to me has always stuck with me still to this day.
Yeah.
And I try to use that.
I think that's a major shift in thinking. It's we can at the end of the day we can do all the avoidance and coping strategies, but ultimately what we're doing is just wasting time that is not going to be given back to us.
Right.
So you can
I've,
choose
I've
to live
waited
it.
20 years. 20 years.
Yeah.
20, I just turned 40 a few days ago.
Mm. Yeah.
And I think about that all the time. And
Yeah.
I cry. So, you know,
But then on the flip side, because I got asked about this recently about the concept of time wasted, or the grief of the time you've lost to agoraphobia. And I know for me, as much as I feel like I wasted time and I lost, years of my life, um, I got to a stage where I'm like, but look what came out of that, and I would not have gotten to that otherwise. And I maybe wouldn't have the same mindset. I maybe wouldn't appreciate those tiny things the way I do. Um, and so I think that, I would rather have spent that time when I did than spend it, in my 60s or 70s and
right.
not have headed the way that I would have headed otherwise. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
this is to add a little humor to this. One thing I will say to anyone who watches this who has agoraphobia, who's stuck home, um, learn another language, learn an instrument. I wasted all those years, and I look back now and I'm like, I should speak 7 languages, and I should have 5 college degrees from online schools.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I sat around drinking and wasting time.
Yeah, I know. It's like you've got all this time at home. Now that I work a lot, I'm like, I used to have so much time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I feel that. So I have two questions to ask you.
Sure.
One of the questions is something I ask everyone, but before I ask you that, being that you're a parent, I want to know what your hope is for the next generation in terms of anxiety, in terms of the way we talk about anxiety and the way we approach kind of healing with anxiety. How do you hope that sort of unfolds in the future?
I definitely come from an era, and I think you and I are roughly the same age. And
Yeah.
I don't know what it's like, but I mean, Australians have a reputation for being tough. So I'll say it here too. I come from an era of like, suck it up, man. You know,
Yeah.
and there is an upside to that because I am a tough person. I mean, there's not a whole lot that can break me, but maybe if I had had help sooner, I wouldn't have had it for 20 years. Maybe if it was taken more seriously, or maybe if the resources were there, you know, it's horrible that we, as a world, certainly, and many countries, for the longest time, that no one even, it was like, well, if you have a heart attack, we'll take care of you. But oh, you're a little depressed. Who cares? You know what I mean?
Mm.
Like, whatever, suck it. We're all depressed. Life sucks,
Yeah.
So I would like, and I tell my son all the time, and my nieces, like, you know, don't be afraid to talk to us because we've certainly gone through it, and you're not alone. And, it's normal to feel certain ways. And yeah, we want you to be tough and have tough skin, but we want you to know that it's okay to not always be strong. You can let go sometimes.
Hmm.
And I didn't really have that growing up, that I could be like, I come from the era of like bullies, and like making fun of people was normal,
Yeah.
and I'm not saying I did it, but like it just was normal. It was just the normal way that people were back then. So I am thankful. And of course people are still bullied today, but at least that there's um
A focus
people
on it.
know it exists, and
Yeah.
and they're trying at least to do something about it. So that goes the same with anxiety and mental health situations. Um I when my son reaches a certain age, I will have that talk with him in more detail about my life.
Hmm.
But I didn't want to do it when he was at a really impressionable age. But I still let him know now, like, it's okay if you don't feel good. It's okay if you're sad. It's okay, if you feel a certain way. But I haven't gotten into like agoraphobia yet. So
Yeah. It's like an onion. Slowly do it.
yes, yes.
Yeah. Okay. So the other question is, what would you say to either yourself back in the day when you were really struggling, or someone who is also really struggling? What would be your advice? What would be your words of wisdom?
If I literally could sit in front of 20-year-old me right now and just be like, dude, you made it. So don't be scared. Every panic attack you have is gonna suck, but you're gonna be fine. So like, don't let it hold you back. And I guess that I could say that right now to my future self. But unfortunately, that's not how this condition works. I can say it to my future self, but I have to believe it, you know? And that's a tough part, like I said, I'm a baby step taker. But if I appeared to my past self, then that's jumping off the deep end. If I was just like, hey, you're fine, go do whatever, then it's like, and you go
Yeah.
do it. So yeah. So I would say, like, it's okay, everything you're going through, and you're gonna be fine. So just go live, but unfortunately we can't go back. So I gotta find a way to make the next 20 years count.
Yeah, I was gonna say it looks a lot to me like you're living, you know?
Trying. So you and I spoke for a minute before we started, and I told you that so this is an example. I hit my head on a
Yeah.
truck that pulled
Yes.
up. I
Yes.
walked right into the mirror, and I cracked my head, and I have a big red mark, and I have a little bit of a headache. Now, the anxiety-ridden me is like, well, what if you have a blood clot? What if you have an aneurysm? What if you pass out? What if you have a concussion? And that's what's swirling in my head the whole time we've been talking.
Mm,
The old me would have ran. I would have gone home by now.
mm,
Uh, but I'm here, and I'm like, yeah, that could happen, but it's highly unlikely. And something I said to my therapist this past week, and it's something that I do with myself, and I think maybe people who watch this could try it. And I say to myself, okay, if I had $1 million and I had to bet right now, am I going to be okay or am I not? What would I bet on? And I would bet I'm going to be fine.
Yeah.
And I look at it like that, like, yeah, I mean, what's the chances that I just hit my head a little? They're pretty low, So I'm going
Yeah.
to bet that I'm going to be okay. That's the better bet. And I try to do that with a lot of things now.
I have never heard that. And it makes so much sense. And I think I'm going to utilize that myself because you're right. It's, when we think like, oh, but I could do this or but it could happen, it's like there's that little opening of like, let's go down the worst case route. But yeah,
Right.
like you said, what's the better bet? What would you bet $1
Yeah.
million on?
Yeah. It's like an NFL team playing 5-year-olds in a football game.
Yeah.
Could the 5-year-olds win? I don't know if all the NFL players hit their heads and fell over, maybe, but chances are no. So I'm going to bet my money on the NFL team. You
Yeah.
know?
100%. Yep.
Yeah.
I love that. That's amazing. I am honored that you shared your story. It was so great
I'm honored
hearing
that
about it. Thank you so much. If anyone from the show wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to reach out?
my Instagram is the real Raymond Michael. I'm constantly on my phone, and then my Facebook is just Raymond Michael. But there's probably 20 million Raymond Michaels in the world, so you'd have to find it. But my Instagram is just the real Raymond Michael with no spaces.
Mhm.
And yeah, anyone can reach out anytime if they want to talk, if they got questions, if they want advice. Or if they just want me to listen while they vent. I can't tell you how many people in my agoraphobia Facebook groups that I've just talked to when they needed through the years, hundreds probably.
Mhm.
So
Thank you. That's beautiful. I will link Raymond's Instagram in the show notes. Um, but yeah, thank you for being on the show.
thank you for having me. I appreciate it so much. And congratulations to you for all the progress you made and how well you're doing. You definitely, I reached out to you because you inspired me, because I saw your story and it gave me hope. So I want you to know that too.
Thank you. That's really nice.
Yeah. All right.
Thank you for listening to the Us Anxious Folk podcast, the podcast for the chronically overwhelmed, perpetually panicked, anxious folk in all of us. If you would like to find more about me, you can find me on YouTube at Lauren Rose or on Instagram at Lauren R_Rose.